Hey guys, today we're going to do a short piece on colors and how we see them. It turns out that this is an overlap between hard physics, which is things that can be measured and directly observed, and perception, the way that we see things. It turns out that we have not evolved as humans. We have not evolved to see things as they really are. There's a lot of compensations and quirks of perception that we have inherited from our ancestors, which apparently made it easier for us to survive. So we're going to be looking at both of those today. So we'll look at black and white and how physicists define those terms and what they are. And we'll look at what colors we can see and compare that to what colors we can perceive. Because as I said before, those are not really the same things. And then finally, we'll look at a few examples of how our brain adjusts colors in interesting ways. So we'll start off with black and white. And in physics, we do not consider black and white to be true colors. So black we consider to be the absence of color. In other words, if you're sitting in a completely darkened room, there's no light in there at all, that means that there's no light coming into your eyes. There's nothing for you to perceive. And we perceive that lack of light as black. So black is simply an absence of color or an absence of light entirely. Now, conversely, white is also not a color. It instead is the combination of all colors. So if we get equal amounts of all of the colors of light that we are able to see, all mixed together, we perceive that as white. But as you probably know, if you look on a rainbow, if you look on a spectrum of all the colors in the visual band of light, excuse me, in the visual band of light, white doesn't appear anywhere on there. So white is a trick of our perception, and it's how we perceive the combination of all colors when they're all mixed together. Now, so that brings up the question of what colors can we see? It turns out we can only see three. And you've probably heard of this before, and you saw this on the exercise you did last week, where you got to mix different colors and see what colors would result from them. Our eyes, most people's eyes, can only perceive three colors, and those colors are blue and green and red. And different frequencies of light stimulate those receptors to varying degrees. So for example, blue here is triggered the most strongly in a strong blue shade of blue. That's why we call it the blue receptor. Likewise, the green receptor is most sensitive to green. And the red, ironically, is actually more strongly stimulated at higher wavelengths, but red is the only one that can see down here at the lower end of the spectrum for red colors. We call it the red receptor, even though it's actually more sensitive to like yellow or orange. So these are the only three colors that we can see. And we perceive other colors based on the combination of how strongly these different cones, that they're called cone cells that receive these colors, how strongly the cone cells are triggered by different frequencies. So for example, if a frequency of light comes in that stimulates the blue receptor and the green receptor at an equal level, right here where those two lines cross, we perceive that as cyan, which is this kind of a sky blue color, pretty sky blue color. You probably saw this when you were doing the lab activity last week. Likewise, if we have equal amounts of red and green, wait for that sound to go away. If we have equal amounts of red light and green light that we are perceiving, we perceive that as yellow, because a yellow wavelength will stimulate both the green and the red to the same level. Now, we can trick our brains, trick our eyes by shining only red light and only green light, a combination of just those two. And if we turn them up to the same intensity, our brain interprets that as yellow, even though there's no yellow light actually entering our eyes. And this is how the screen that you're looking at right now works. Your computer screen or your cell phone screen only produces blue, green, and red. And the computer varies the intensities of those colors to create the illusion of all the other colors. Now, an example of that, the way some colors are purely illusions, is magenta, this one over here. Magenta, as you probably recall from the lab last week, you get that when you combine equal amounts of red and blue. Now, on this graph right here, it looks like a combination of red and blue that we should perceive that as kind of cyan, just like we perceive blue and green. But we don't. Our brain perceives that combination of equal amounts of red and blue as this purplish pink that we call magenta. And notice, magenta doesn't appear anywhere on the color spectrum. This is a color that only exists as a trick of our perception. There is no magenta wavelength. It only exists when our eye receives equal amounts of blue and red stimulation on our blue and red cones. Okay, so that's how we perceive colors. Now I want to move on to some tricks of perception and some things that ways that our brains have evolved here. So here's an interesting one. We'll start off with this one. We've got a cow with a fly sitting on its nose. And when you look at this picture over here, you can see that the left half of the picture is tinted blue and the right half is tinted yellow. Okay. Now, as I'm talking here, I want you to stare at this fly over here and try to do it without blinking if you can. So we're staring at that fly on the right. Now, while we're looking at that, it turns out that our brain compensates for background colors. So, for example, if we're walking around in the jungle and all the light is filtering through green leaves, it casts everything with kind of a green glow. And we still have to be able to see tigers and leopards that are going to eat us, even if they're in green light. So our brains compensate for ambient background colors and adjust our perception so that we still see true colors. Okay, it's been long enough. You've been staring at the fly on the right. Now I want you to look at the fly on the cow's nose. And when you do that, you'll see that the cow looks normal. Okay, the colors on that picture of the cow look proper. It doesn't look anymore like the right half is tinted yellow and the left half is tinted blue. It looks like it's all regular. And the reason that it all looks normal is because when we were staring at the fly on the right, our brain was kind of learning to ignore the yellow on the right side of the frame and ignore the blue on the left side of the frame. See, our brain tries to adjust everything to ordinary sunlight. And if your brain perceives that, hey, there's a lot of blue light around, it just kind of filters it out. It erases it from our perception. So then when we look back at the picture of the cow, it erases the blue tint from the left side and it erases the yellow tint from the right side, and we perceive the colors of the cow as they really are, or they really should be. Neat trick. This happens, they've done some research on this. This happens both within the eye itself, the retina kind of fatigues to some colors, and within the brain as well. So it's a combination of both things. Now, this next one is a very, very strange illusion. This is the freakiest illusion that I've got, because even when you know what's going on, you still see the illusion. Okay, so when you look at this picture here, you probably see a drawing of a girl, and she has one blue eye and one gray eye and a blue bead in her hair. And the left side of the image is covered with red. Okay, so that's what most people see. It turns out that her eyes are actually the same color. They're actually both the same color of gray, which is on the right side here. Okay, now what's going on here? Well, there's a part of your vision called the fovea, which is a very small field right in the center of your vision. And if you hold your thumb out at arm's length, there we go, hold your thumb out at arm's length, out this way, your fovea is about as big as your thumbnail when you hold your arm out there at arm's length. And your fovea is the part of your vision that can actually see detail, fine detail, and is also the most sensitive to color. Most of your vision, most of your vision, which is the part of your vision outside your fovea, is optimized for detecting motion. So, well, let's see. It's probably difficult to demonstrate on the screen here. But if you hold your arm out in the edge of your vision and you move your fingers, you can see that motion very, 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 very clearly. But you probably can't count how many fingers you're holding up when it's out on the way out to the side in your peripheral vision. Okay, so if you're holding up 4 fingers, you can't count the 4 fingers out there just by looking at your peripheral vision. But if you move one of those fingers, you'll immediately detect the motion. So anyway, most of your vision detects motion, and that attracts our attention. And then we ratchet our foveas over to see what it was that moved and see if it's a threat or food or whatever it might be. So yeah, that's how we see is we point our fovea at things and figure out what it is. This is why you have to move your eyes when you're reading, because your fovea is the only part of your vision which can distinguish one letter from another. So you have to move your fovea across the page to be able to perceive the individual letters and read. Now, but there's more. It turns out that the area around your fovea, just outside the fovea, samples the ambient light. It samples the light which is shining on the thing that your fovea is looking at. So if you look at the girl's blue eye, and that's where you're pointing your fovea, then your brain is taking a sample of the colors which is just outside the fovea here, just outside it. And in this case, your brain says, hey, it's all red. All of that color, there's red everywhere out there. So your brain assumes that if there's red just outside your fovea, the thing that you're looking at also is bathed in red color. Okay? So your brain thinks this pupil that you're looking at, the iris of her eye here, that's got red light shining on it. And then your brain says, okay, well, the red is going to distort the color that I see. And your brain says, okay, I'm actually seeing this color of gray, but I know there's red light shining on it. And the color that would look gray in this red light is actually blue, like the bead in her hair. So if we take this blue bead and we shine red light on it, it's going to look gray. And your brain knows that, so it sees the gray and perceives it as blue. I'll say that again. There's actually gray wavelengths coming into your eye from this one of the girl's eyes. Your brain sees the gray, but your brain believes that there's red light shining on it, and therefore it must be blue, because this shade of blue with red light shining on it will look gray. So we perceive the gray as blue. Now, how can we undo this illusion? You may have seen it already as I was doing this demo, but I'll point it out to you. If you look at this eye, if you focus your foveas on this eye, or maybe on this corner of her eye, like the mole on her, well, yeah, the corner here, but this eye works pretty well. And you look at this eye over here in your peripheral vision. So you're keeping your eyes pointed at this eye, you're just kind of looking at it, this one in the corner of your eye, you'll probably notice that her eye turns gray again. And when you go back and look straight at it, it's blue. But when you point your eyes away from it a little bit, it turns gray again. And this is because if your foveas are pointing over here, they take a sample and say, nope, no red. And so your perception of that color is as it truly is. Really cool illusion. Okay, this is the last one I'll show you. The question is, are these wolves here in this image, are they the same color or are they different colors? And most of us, me included, would say that this is a dark colored wolf and this is a light colored wolf. Even though in reality, and I'm sure you're not surprised by this, they're actually identical to the two wolves that are over here on the right side. They're identical to each other and they're identical to the ones that are in the image here. Now, we perceive this one as darker because we perceive that it is standing in a bright light. It's silhouetted against a light background. So we say, well, the sun must be shining on that wolf. And conversely, this one we perceive as standing in shadow because it's lighter than the background. So we say, oh, this one must be standing in the shade of a tree. And yes, the same amount of light energy is coming into our eye from this one as from this one, just like these two are the same. But our brain makes a compensation again and says, okay, if this wolf looks like this when it's standing in the sunlight, then it must be a dark color. So we perceive it as being darker. And conversely, this one, even though it looks exactly the same, there's the same amount of light energy coming into our eyeballs from it. We say, well, if it looks like this when it's standing in a shadow, then it must be a light color. And our brain makes us perceive this as a light color. So we see these two wolves sitting right next to each other, and we perceive this one is dark and this one is light, even though they're exactly the same. Now, again, these are all traits that have evolved, that we've inherited, because we have to be able to see threats in different light levels and with different light filtering through. If we can't recognize a leopard, a yellow leopard with black spots, as a leopard with yellow fur and black spots, even when it's in green light or even when it's standing in a shadow, we're going to get eaten. So our brain does all these automatic compensations to our perception without us even knowing it. Okay, that's long enough. I hope you found that interesting, and I've enjoyed teaching this class. I've enjoyed having you guys in my class, and I wish you lots of luck and hope we see you around school in the future.